Okay, thank you, Mayor Marchand, members of the council. Good evening. My name's Steve Stewart. I'm your planning manager, and I'm joined up here at the desk by Turhan Sonmez, one of our associate planners, the project planner who inherited this project, or volunteered to inherit it back when we passed that on. Also, engineering specialist on my right, Mike Pato, and then our environmental consultant from Lamphere Gregory Associates is Rebecca Ald. So before we get started a little bit, I'm going to provide a brief history of the site. And before we do that, I did want to note that the proposal before you this evening is the result and the response to a lot of comments and suggestions and recommendations from a lot of folks in this room, including the Save Our Garaventa Hill group, nearby neighbors, our federal and state resource agencies, the Livermore Area Recreation and Park District, City Council, and staff. So the 32-acre site is located up in our northeast part of our city, right in between Laughlin Road and Vasco Road. The Altamont Creek Elementary and Altamont Creek Park are directly south across Altamont Creek from the project site. And this site's the last undeveloped parcel that's part of the Marilissa development out there. So the site does have an extensive land use history and was part of in the early 90s as part of the Marilissa development plan for just under 400 units in the area. You can see the project outlined here at the time had sort of a loop road around the knolls with some larger estate lots on top. In the mid-90s, the City Council approved the subdivision that created the residential development around the project site, also the school site and the park site, in addition to the Garaventa Wetlands Preserve parcel. And at this time, the property was designated as a remainder during that development. Would just be developed in the future, but at that time it was noted that some of the density allocated to this parcel was transferred off to the site and used in the other development, but that 76 units would remain available as part of the overall density transfer for that overall project. In 2000, Western Pacific Housing applied under the city's housing implementation program with this 45-unit development proposal. It had, again, 45 units, had a loop road coming along. The entire site was pretty much developed except for the northwest corner, a couple of cul-de-sacs up on top of the knolls with the view or estate lots up on top. Due to below average landscaping contributions to city facilities and its location, the project was ranked below average and did not receive housing allocations that year. In 2011, the current applicant, Lafferty Communities, applied for the development plan with this layout, included 76 single-family residential lots with a loop road, couple of cul-de-sacs up there. The road looped over the saddle between the two knolls on the property and included a 2-lane vehicular access bridge extension from Hawk Street over Altamont Creek and into the project. Staff worked with the applicant to revise this proposal to reduce the grading and try and preserve more of those knolls and the landforms there. And this plan, you can see, eliminated the lots just off of Bear Creek and the lots at the base of the easternmost knoll to try and preserve that landform, and then add some other changes, including getting rid of the little cul-de-sacs that opened up more of the northwestern knoll. Project still had the 2-lane vehicular bridge extending from Hawk Street and over Altamont Creek. So based on public feedback, including those at a public hearing at the Planning Commission for the draft environmental impact report, the applicant made revisions to that project, and you can see that on the screen. And this is in response to comments heard at that public meeting for encouraging cut-through traffic with the bridge here, so the bridge is removed. And again, still had the lotting pattern to preserve most of the knolls. The outcrop in the northwest corner was to be saved. Also in response to concerns from the Livermore Area Recreation and Park District, trees and vegetation were removed from the outer planter natural buffer area to eliminate perching opportunities for raptors that would prey on burrowing owls that are known to habitate in the Garaventa Wetlands Preserve. So the Planning Commission did consider this project shown on the left, and they recommended denial at that time, primarily due to the extensive grading and some of the comments from LARPD at the time, and also from comments taken during that environmental impact hearing. So in 2015, the applicant went back to the drawing board and revised the project again, primarily to reduce grading. And the main change was the removal of the loop roadway that required a lot of grading up on those knolls. So that was changed into an emergency vehicle access that essentially followed the contours of that saddle there between. So rather than proceed to the City Council with a recommendation for denial, the applicant did make these changes to the site plan. Again, you'll note now that the bridge is no longer part of the proposal, again, in response to some of the comments from the neighborhood and the surrounding developed residential about cut-through traffic. Just another note in response to some of the comments they heard, they did add, it's really hard to see on this slide, a pedestrian connection to the existing trail network that's off the site there. And then they also provided visual simulations to show what that project would look like in its context. So at this point, the project still required a legislative act by the council because they were still seeking to change the zoning on the project to vary from floor area ratio limitations and also setbacks. So in 2015, the Planning Commission did vote to recommend the council approve this plan that you see on the screen. And they felt that their 2014 concerns had been addressed. This is the same plan that the council looked at later in September of 2015 and directed the applicant to return to the Planning Commission with a project that was more subordinate to the natural landforms, reduce some of the grading, and provide an emergency vehicle access to the site. Specifically, these are some of the methods that the council recommended the applicant explore to reduce the grading, including reducing the number and size of the units, the overall height, narrow some of the street widths, reduce some of the retaining wall heights on the site, and again, provide that emergency vehicle access. And here in the green are the responses that the development plan has incorporated, including reducing the number of units from 47 to 44 total. The actual number of buildings is 41, and that's due to their approach to meet the affordable housing inclusionary ordinance. Turhan will go over that in a little more detail. They reduced the average size of the units to be more comparable with the neighborhood, reduced basically the whole height of development by moving it down the hill, narrowed street widths, enabled further reduction in some of the grading, reduced the largest retaining wall heights, which were on the northeastern boundary up around 6 to 7 feet, reduced those to 2 feet by pulling those lots in off of the perimeter and having a bit of a buffer between the development and the open space. And also provided a split retaining wall at the project entry. Instead of a single, I think, 6 to 7 foot retaining wall, it's now split into a 4-foot retaining wall with a 3-foot bench for planting, and then a 3-foot wall on top of that. So I'll show you some pictures of that in a minute, and also the EVA. This is a comparison of the 2015 grading plan where the council provided that direction, and this is the proposal in front of you this evening. You will see that the retaining wall I was just talking about has been changed to a split level retaining wall that steps back and allows planting between the steps. And what that did, along with moving the entire road down further south on the site and also narrowing it up, was enabled to preserve more of this knoll in its natural condition and move that grading that chased that slope back up the hill previously further down the hill. You can see that there was a handful of units removed from this entry in order to preserve that view as you go on to the site over the bridge as a pedestrian or bicyclist, that is, of the knoll. A couple units up here in the corner were eliminated, and then a 20-foot wide emergency vehicle access only bridge with pedestrian and bicycle access is provided at the Huck Street extension. And with that, I'll turn it over to Turhan. I'll walk you through some more of the project details.
So shown here is the 2018 site plan incorporating council's 2015 directives. As Steve mentioned, the current proposals for 44 units. 38 of those would be detached single-family homes, which are identified here in green. Please note that the ones signify where the single-level homes are going to be located. They've been strategically located at the project entry and then up in the northwest corner to help preserve views of the knolls and surrounding hillsides. Steve mentioned the project also proposes duets. They're shown here in yellow. These units would partially satisfy the city's inclusionary housing requirement, and the remainder of the requirement would be satisfied by a cash payment equivalent to the additional 3.15 affordable units required. This method is consistent with what the city's done before for other projects that include the Orchid Ranch and the Grove subdivisions. Shown here in blue is the bike, pedestrian, and EVA bridge at Hawk Street. And as Steve mentioned, due in large part to community, staff, and agency input over the years, the knolls and rock outcroppings will remain undeveloped with public access trails. Those are shown here in red. And the orange squiggly sections identify where portions of the trail would be ADA improved. The project architect will discuss the architecture and floor plans in greater detail as part of the applicant's presentation, but shown here are the proposed elevation styles, which are Spanish, villa, and farmhouse. The current proposal has significantly increased architectural diversity since 2015, when the only architectural style being proposed was the villa style. And the home sizes are comparable to Altamont Creek development to the east and comparable to the Bluffs development to the north. All told, the project proposes 5 floor plans, including the duet floor plan. The duet units are all 2-story and are evenly dispersed throughout the development. The project's corner lot locations have been utilized to allow the duet units' front doors and garage doors to be located on their own separate frontage. The duet buildings have achieved design parity with the attached units, including having comparable massing and scale to the 2-story single-family detached units. Again, other projects with similar duet units include the Orchid Ranch project, which is east of Isabel Avenue, and the Grove subdivision off of Mines Road. As part of their proposal, the applicant has prepared several before and after simulations conveying the project. This particular simulation is viewed from a location east of the site near Knoll Court. We have a key down in the bottom right-hand corner. The view is due west towards the project, and as you see, the project is only slightly visible. This photo sim is viewed from a location a few hundred feet east of the previous slide location and has a different orientation. It's more northwest facing. The Planning Commission back in December did request additional photo simulations, and this vantage provides a view around the southeastern knoll. This view is from the western terminus of Bear Creek Drive, where access to the project is proposed. Steve mentioned the retaining wall on the right-hand side that steps back and provides plantings to be less visually impactful. This slide shows a cross-section of that retaining wall. Each of the walls would be 3 and 4 feet tall, and the bench in the middle is 3 feet wide. This view is from the sports fields at Altamont Creek School, looking north towards the project. From this perspective, you can see the bridge and 1 or 2 units to the left, to the west side. Over here, after. With previous versions of this project, units were significantly more visible in this view. Shown here is the same view enlarged and showing 7-year established landscaping. This view is from the northern terminus of Hawk Street, where the bridge is proposed. A view of one of the knolls that lines up with the bridge has been preserved at this location. This photo simulation is viewed from Vasco Road, looking east to the project site. The proposed project is visible in the foreground, with the ridge lines of the preserved knolls visible behind the proposed units. Here's the same view, again enlarged and with 7-year established landscaping. Note here the absence of trees in response to the Park District's concerns with providing trees in the natural buffers. This is a photo sim that the Planning Commission requested. Here the project is viewed from a trail location southwest of the site. From this vantage point, Brushy Peak would be visible. This photo sim is from the same location as the previous slide, but the orientation is more east-facing to provide a slightly different view. The trail where the photo is taken from is adjacent to existing homes. So in this vantage point, you see some existing development. This is a rear yard fence that you see in the right-hand side. In summary, significant changes from the 2015 version of the project include the project's compliance with the existing zoning. Due to this, the site does not require rezoning for project approval. The only required entitlements are the subdivision map and site plan design review. The current proposal also has fewer units and smaller units than any previous version of the project, and a public amenity in the form of the EVA bicycle and pedestrian bridge is being proposed by this project and would serve as an expansion to the trail network. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Rebecca Old of Lanfear Gregory, who will go over the environmental document.
Thank you and good evening. As noted, my name is Rebecca Auld with Lanfear Gregory, primary report preparer for the environmental documentation. I'm just going to summarize briefly today what we did for the analysis and what the conclusions were, and then I'll be available if there's any technical questions. So knowing that there were environmental concerns related to this site and project, we did complete an Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, covering all environmental topic areas under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. Through that analysis, we found that there were no impacts that would remain significant following mitigation, so nothing would be unavoidable. Instead, the 21 potentially significant impacts that we identified were able to be reduced to a level below significance thresholds through the implementation of mitigation measures. All other topic areas had either no impacts or impacts that were already below significance thresholds. So let's go over briefly what those are. First, some topic areas had impacts below significance thresholds. This was in aesthetics or visual, land use, services, utilities, and noise. I'm not going to talk about those since there weren't any significant impacts unless there's questions later. A couple other topic areas had some impacts that could be mitigated through the implementation of standard mitigation that apply to most projects. This included for emissions, mitigation requiring compliance with the city's greenhouse gas reduction plan, increased energy efficiency, best management practices to reduce construction emissions. And then while there are no known cultural resources on the site, mitigation would require a plan for unexpected discovery and the appropriate handling in that event. So other detailed analysis required some project-specific mitigation to be implemented. I'm going to go over these in more detail. So first up, wetlands. There are a lot of wetlands in the area, but almost none on the development area of the project itself. That tiny little orange circle there is, in fact, the wetlands within the subdivision area. It actually looks like a little hole somebody dug with a shovel. It's 0.004 acres. However, it does qualify based on its characteristics as wetlands, so mitigation requires appropriate coordination and replacement through regulatory agencies. So this is the biological slide. There's a good amount of natural areas in the vicinity, and those areas host some sensitive species and habitats. We did numerous biological surveys and studies, and this is one of the many figures from those. This is just an example of those figures. It shows known occurrences of certain sensitive species. In this case, it's California red-legged frog and California tiger salamander. And it shows those known occurrences throughout the area, but not actually on the project site. And indeed, when we had our biologists go out to the site, they also did not find any individuals of those sensitive species. However, they noted that the site could be used as supportive habitat for a number of those species. And therefore, mitigation was applied as if those species were found, because it could be used that way even though they were not. The mitigation includes pre-construction surveys and protection measures to prevent the potential for harm during the construction activities. And then also coordination with regulatory agencies for off-site habitat protection to compensate for the potential habitat loss represented by development of the site. And that off-site habitat protection would meet or exceed the recommended mitigation ratios of the regulatory agencies. So this slide shows the geological exploration that was performed at the site. All the blue dots are areas that they dug and the numbers trenches that they performed to characterize the soil and subsoil conditions. So quite a bit of discovery happened at the site to make sure that there would not be issues with development of the area. Mitigation includes basically adherence to the geotechnical standards that are appropriate to the specific characters of the site. It includes soil and foundation preparation, slope stability based on those specific characteristics. Ooh. Not sure what happened. This doesn't seem to want to go back. Okay. So this is the transportation slide. This is, again, one of the figures from the transportation analysis. This particular one shows the amount of project trips that would be added to vicinity intersections during peak hours. It's not intended for you to be able to read all the numbers, just as something to look at while we talk about it. So The conclusions were that the trips would be within the residential street capacities that this project connects to, and they would not cause project-specific impacts at any of the intersections. However, when combined with area development, so we looked at a cumulative scenario, there would be one impact under a cumulative level that this project would contribute to, and it was the need for improvements at Laughlin and North Front intersection, with mitigation requiring contribution to those improvements. So again, to summarize, despite comprehensive analysis to address the known concerns with development of this project site, we didn't find any impacts that would remain significant after mitigation. All the impacts would be reduced to a level below significance thresholds through the implementation of mitigation. And as was kind of discussed, the project has changed over time. The current project is actually similar to the environmentally superior alternative that was originally identified and analyzed in the draft EIR. So then just to summarize how the changing project has changed the environmental analysis and conclusions over time. The number of homes has gone down every time, so impacts related to issues like the amount of traffic or emissions would all have gone down over time. The bridge or no bridge has changed over time. Originally, it was a vehicular bridge that would have required creek realignment, so some amount of biological impacts. And then no bridge, but now the pedestrian EVA would not require creek realignment, so only temporary impacts to the creek. So it's covered within the original analysis and would have a reduced environmental impact. We were required to take a look at the changing projects as they occurred. And we actually looked at the first change in the first final EIR and the second change in what was called a reissued final EIR. As I mentioned, it's actually very similar to one of the alternatives that we already took a look at. So mostly we just needed to update some responses to comments to make sure that they were appropriate to the current project. And to compare the impacts from the original project that was analyzed in the draft EIR, all of the impacts would be the same or reduced. Fewer homes and vehicles, less grading, less stream impact, reduced potential for vehicular pedestrian conflict, and only minor revisions were required to reflect the revised project. Did you want to talk about it?
So just to, before we finish up, Rebecca mentioned that the off-site mitigation for this development would be required, and that is also owned by the Garaventa family. It's an 85-acre piece here in the Springtown Alkali Sink up in just north of Springtown. This is the 300 acres that the city owns. This property has a much higher value in terms of biological diversity on it. It has a stretch of Altamont Creek that you can't really see, but winds through the property. Has alkali soils, scalds, seasonal wetlands, has bird speak on the property, also habitat for the tar plant. I don't know that anybody surveyed out there for that just yet. And then also occurrences of California tiger salamander, vernal pool fairy shrimp, and I believe red-legged frog. So, recently the council did authorize the city to work on a couple of projects here to receive mitigation money from other projects, one in Dublin and one out in Discovery Bay, to conduct some wetland restoration by the removal of noxious and invasive weeds, putting up some fencing to try and eliminate the trespass that's ongoing out there and causing significant damage. And then also signage to inform the community of the valuable resources out here and also offer an education opportunity. So those are in play currently that the city's working on. We're also in discussions about the entire sink with these property owners. They've built a mitigation project down here for a PG&E transmission line. It actually has birds beak all over it now. City owns some more property down here, so if we could get all of that under one easement and one management plan, it might be best for the sink in the long run. That's still some early discussions we have ongoing with an individual. So with that, it's back to Ron for our recommendation.
So in conclusion, staff and the Planning Commission recommend the City Council adopt a resolution certifying the environmental document, and after approval of the application, instruct staff to file a notice of determination with the Alameda County Clerk. Staff and Planning Commission also recommend the City Council adopt a resolution approving vesting tentative tract map 8094 as part of subdivision 13001 and site plan design review 13.5, authorizing the allocation of 44 housing implementation program units for the project, and authorizing the applicant to provide 6 duet units as proposed and to make a cash payment equivalent to 3.15 affordable units to satisfy the inclusionary housing obligation. That concludes staff's presentation. Building material samples have been provided by the applicant on the table. Also, supplemental materials have been provided by staff. These include an April 18 letter from the Planning Division to the Save Our Garaventa Hill group, which responds to various inquiries and concerns expressed by the group. Also included in the supplemental materials is another April 18 letter from the Save Our Garaventa Hill group themselves, which provides comments on the proposed landscaping for Council's consideration this evening. In addition to staff's presentation, the applicant has also prepared a presentation. Staff can respond to questions from the City Council now or hold all questions until after the applicant presents. Thank you.
And we did have a few words from our city attorney as well.
Okay. And now a few words from our attorney.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I just wanted to reiterate, it's in the staff report, but I think it's important to reiterate that with respect to this project, that you are acting as a judicial body, not as a legislative body with respect to this particular project. So what you would be doing is looking at the rules and regulations with respect to planning and zoning that apply to this property as it exists, and determining whether or not the project as it's presented meets those requirements, not establishing any new rules or regulations that you would be doing as a legislative body otherwise.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, let me see. Are there any questions from the council at this point for staff? Vice Mayor Carling.
Yes, thanks. Thanks to all of you for the very thorough presentations. I have a question for Ms. Alt about environmental conclusions. The current project is similar to the environmentally superior alternative. What does that mean? Help me understand what that means.
So for an environmental analysis in a draft EIR, the preparers are required, along with the city, to consider whether there could be changes to the project that would actually reduce or avoid the impacts that were identified for the project. So if you got rid of the bridge, or if you reduce the number of units, could you substantially reduce the impacts that you had identified? So for this project, we considered, I have to refresh my memory here. Yeah, so this was very similar to the reduced density project, which is also the current general plan allowance alternative, we called it. And that looked at a 47 unit project on the site with reduced impacts related to the bridge itself.
Okay, so when you did the original analysis, it wasn't on the originally proposed 76 unit with the road on Hawk Street. It was not. It was not that.
So it was. So
how is this
let me
one
show
not
ya.
environmentally?
right. So
That's
one
what I'm struggling with.
Right. One of the chapters, the last chapter of this book, which is the draft EIR,
Okay.
is the chapter that looks at potential alternatives. So this amount of the book looked at their proposed 76 unit project with the bridge, and then this part at the end said, how might we reduce impacts of this project through alternatives?
CEQA requires, essentially as part of its standards, that you develop and analyze certain very specific alternatives.
Sure.
One including a no project alternative, and one
Sure.
basically called a environmentally sensitive or superior alternative, and that tries to meet most of the objectives of the project, but with reduced impacts. And so it is trying to develop a project that has fewer impacts than the originally designed project.
Okay, so what made the other one superior? No bridge? At all?
The reduction in units. So in other words, remember the original project had
Right.
76 units, dropping it to 47. The reduction in grading having to do with fewer units. The elimination of the vehicle bridge, which in that case required realignment of the creek.
Right.
The pedestrian and EVA does not, so it maintains that environmental superiority. And so that's why the summary said many of those things were accomplished and, in fact, even enhanced from that environmentally superior alternative with this particular design.
So you don't mean that there was another one that's superior to this one. You just
No,
mean
this actually looks a lot like that
got it.
alternative was
I was
developed 3 years
misreading
ago.
the sentence. Sorry. Thank you.
It's all semantics, right? Councilmember Monroe?
That was actually similar to what I was going to ask or say, whatever. But I do have a question that was brought up to me, which is, could you talk a little bit about the danger from floods or fire or any of the other 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that might invade? But in all seriousness, floods or fire have been raised, and I think that those are legitimate concerns.
Yeah, the project itself is out of the flood zone, so there's not a worry there. A lot of the concerns brought up in the past were what happens if the culvert at Laughlin Road gets blocked and the road becomes impassable? How would you get out? And so that was part of the impetus for the council directing the applicant to look at an emergency vehicle access there. We're in a seismically active region. And so, there are fault traces out in the area. You can see as the other development that's been approved out there avoids those in almost a linear fashion. It's very apparent when you look at the aerial photos. And then regarding wildfire, so the project was reviewed by the Livermore Pleasanton Fire Department, and they have reviewed the preliminary hydrant locations, the loading on the street, the widths, the bridge, and all of those satisfy their requirements for battling a fire that might occur out there. Their first priority is to protect the structures, and then look at the hillsides if those are still left.
So the concern was raised about the emergency bridge itself in the case of a flood. Could that be washed out?
Yeah, the bridge designs has to be above a particular high water mark in a particular flood. If it's 100
3 feet above the
100-year flood. So it's 3 feet above the 100-year flood level, so that it would not be washed out in a flood event.
Unlike the bridge at Laughlin, it is a single span bridge, so there is nothing in the floodway that would actually catch or create an obstacle for floodwaters. So if floodwaters made it essentially through the Laughlin bridge, and that actually is a segment set of culverts there, concrete culverts, they would actually have no problem getting under the EVA.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, you said the applicant had a presentation as well? Sir.
Set that up, please. Just the first page for me. That's all I need. How do I get up and down? Okay, we should have an educational course. Which one?
There we go.
There we go. Yeah. Good evening, Mayor Marchand and the other members of the City Council. My name is Patrick Toohey. I represent Lafferty Communities, the applicant in this on this submittal. This is application. We're here tonight with our consulting group. They'll come up and each speak briefly after my thoughts are done, my comments. After September 2015, when we were before this body and received a lot of direction, we took a pause. We wanted to clear our mind, be able to take a fresh look at the project. After kind of focusing on the direction to reduce units, we went back and took a look at the existing underlying zoning, our PD 115. It goes back to the mid-90s, I believe. It's been there for a while. What that zoning does, it simplifies our application. We get rid of a general plan amendment and a rezone. It's a straight tentative map application. What we have to live with there is increased setbacks and a more stringent FAR calculation. So the setbacks helped us reduce our lot count from 47 to 41. And the FAR drove, even with the increased lot sizes, drove the house size down. So just implementing the underlying zoning and eliminating the general plan amendment and the rezone kind of helped us with those two issues. I can appreciate that 47 to 41 isn't perhaps the biggest number you might have been looking for, but there's another way to look at it. I know it's 47 to 44, but if you think about it, we went from 47 to 41, and then we lost 3 additional units for the application of the affordable housing requirements. So in reality, we ended up losing 9 units of market rate housing, over 20% of our last project that was before you. We think that is doing very well compared to what we've had to do on other sites. So in addition to that, we've reduced the grading by 46,000 cubic yards. Staff had a graphic up there that showed you what it would do. By reducing the grading, we've been able to lower the lots, which then provides a better look at the knolls once the homes are built. I'm not going to say it's a significant improvement, but it's anywhere from 2 to 5 feet, depending on your perspective. It also allowed us to reduce the retaining walls, primarily in the northeast corner and along Bear Creek Drive. One of the comments we received in the prior public hearings is that the big scarp or grading along the Bear Creek Drive wasn't adequate. It was inadequate. So with the privatization of the roads, meaning an HOA will now care for those and they won't be public roads, i.e. city maintained, we were able to shrink that roadway up by eliminating parking. Then by splitting the retaining wall that the staff's already talked about, we were able to eliminate a big face of a wall, put up a 3-foot planting area between it, and thereby reduce the big grading on the south face of the east knoll. So between the grading and then the street privatization, we've really been able to reduce a lot of the impacts on the grading and therefore gain that 46,000 cubic yard reduction, or better yet, 25% reduction in the grading from the last plan we provided to you. We also have the EVA in there as a capital cost of the project. That's fairly obvious. That's on the builder developer. But the maintenance is also on this sole project of now 44 homes with including 6 BMRs, affordable units. We've taken that on through a CFD. There'll be a HOA in addition to that on the HOA maintained properties, but we also taken on the CFD requirements. The city is planning on hiring the HOA to maintain that bridge where it's practical. But the entire cost of this bridge, this EVA bridge that serves that entire community north of Altamont Creek, is on this entire project forevermore. We'll build it and we'll maintain it. So 100 plus units or so north of Altamont Creek are protected if and when the Laughlin crossing ever fails. So it's just a developer perspective. That's all I mean to share with you. Lastly, 56% of the open space remains privately held but publicly accessible. Again, HOA will maintain that. CFD is in place to cover some of the maintenance of that when necessary. So between an HOA and the CFD, there's no exposure for public funds to be used on this project. I want to say almost entirely, but staff can answer that maybe more specifically. We've gone to great lengths to rejigger this project, refigure it out, and we think we've addressed your direction given to us in the September 2015 meeting. So unless there's any other questions for me, I'd like to turn it over to the consultant team, let them run through their presentation, and then we can take questions individually or as a group later.
Okay, thank you.
See if I can figure it out. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Steve Licklider. I'm with Ruggieri Jensen Azar. We're the civil engineers for the project. my goal here is to describe what changes we've made since the council last saw the project in 2015 and where we are now. So in these following slides, I'll run through what was the plan in 2015 and how we've modified it in red to show the changes. We eliminated 6 lots. We added the EVA bridge. We created 2 ADA connections for connections to existing trail systems. As has been mentioned, we've reduced the amount of grading and tried to improve the views of the knolls from afar. We've increased the setbacks. The floor area ratio has been reduced. Home sizes have been reduced. And there's been an 85-acre conservation parcel that was previously mentioned. What I'd like to do is just run around the project and try and identify specific areas of changes. So we'll start down here and work clockwise. So in this, what we called Area 1, you can see this black line represents where we originally had the grading design by making a series of adjustments, including moving the street and narrowing it. We've been able to bring that grading line down the hill substantially to this red line. Okay, so let me walk through these. We removed Lot 1, as I mentioned previously. We've moved the entry road south, and we've narrowed the road and made it private. And as was previously mentioned, the retaining wall that is along this entrance has been redesigned to be a stepped wall with landscaping in between so we can screen it. And there's the ADA path down to the existing Altamont Creek trail system. And at the edge of the EVA bridge, or in the view corridor, we've opened it up. We've taken out these 4 lots highlighted in gray so that the views from the end of Hawk Street and the school are better at this point in time. The maintenance, as Pat mentioned, maintenance of the bridge will be by the association and a CFD. Again, the road is narrowed through this section of the project. Retaining walls have been put behind the houses so that we could bring the slope line down the hill so that the grading would not be as far up the hillside as it was previously. The retaining walls are behind the houses, so they really won't be seen. Moving on to the next area. If I can get this to work, maybe I need to point in a different direction towards a computer. There we go. Lot 14 was also removed. Road again is narrowed. We added retaining walls again behind the lots so that, or behind the houses, again to reduce the views, or reduce the grading and minimize impacts. Up towards the northern, let's see, this would be the northern end of the project. We've reduced the height of the wall where we could, steepened the slope to try and reduce the amount of grading that would be involved. There we go. Again, reduced the width of the road. We've lowered the pads, so we dropped the elevation of these lots. And this thing isn't clicking for me. Okay, now we're on the east side of the project. And again, this is where the height of the walls was of concern before. We had about a 6-foot high wall. We've adjusted that. We've shortened our lot depths and moved the wall up to the top and reduced it substantially. So those all of these pads were reduced, or the elevations were reduced to lower the view of the roof lines. And we've pulled the back lot line in. It used to match out to the boundary of the property. There's now some open space in between the boundary and the back of the lots. This shows the changes in the setbacks and how where they've increased from 15 to 25 and from 12 to 15 in the front, with an average side yard going from 7 to 10. This shows the relationship of the conservation land relative to the project site. This is the ALTA for that. So I'll turn it over now to our landscape architect, David Gates. I think you want to hit that one and point it that way.
Do you have a pointer too?
Yeah, you're welcome to it. There we
Steal
go.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I appreciate seeing you at the art events. You seem to be at all of those. That's great. I'm just going to talk briefly about the landscape character. I think the goal for the landscape is to keep it as much a grass knoll as we can, and then make it accessible to the existing trails, pathways, and sidewalks, which this diagram shows. This is an enlargement of the planting plan, and you can see several components. There's the entry component here with the walls. This is C3, it's a water quality zone, and that'll be indigenous riparian plants like willows and buckeyes. The knoll areas themselves will be mostly left as grassland. We've sprinkled a few native oaks up there just to increase the visual character. And then we've created some screening in these areas here because there are some existing residents, and that'll help a little bit, and it'll create a sense of an entry for the people using the pedestrian pathway. And then you can see the rest of it basically is grasses. It's a mixture of 3 or 4 species of grasses. This just gets you into the genus species. You can see the oaks. You can see the patterns. I won't get into the detail. It's all drought tolerant. It's all typical today for the best management practice for vegetation. A lot of natives and adjustable variants. This is the character. The goal is to keep it, the pattern of Livermore is nice natural stone and natural materials. So the entry walls and the bridge abutments and elements are those similar materials. And this is just a close-up. We're creating a gateway and an entrance to the existing neighbors. There's a separation there. There's the open space, and you can see we've scattered the oaks in a way so you have views in and views from across. We'll look through and around the oaks. Here's the wetland area with the riparian character as it abuts the creek. This just shows you the nature of what the look will be as you're coming in from the existing neighborhood. So there will be the retaining walls will be on this side, the double wall. You can see the oaks, and you can see here the riparian character, and this is a 7-year growth projection to give you a sense of what that looks like as you're coming into the community. At this point, I'm going to give you the architect to learn about the architecture.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm with Mark Rutherford with William Hesmallach Architects, the architect for the project. I think staff has covered a lot of the revisions to the architecture very well, but I'd like to just go back and cover some of the high points as far as the changes from what was proposed before and where we are right now. So the architecture itself, as far as the buildings, we have what we had in 47 buildings before, and now we're down to 41 buildings because 3 of the buildings to get to the 44 units are actually the duet units. So we've reduced the number of buildings on site, and also in complying with increased setbacks both on sides and rear and front, we have smaller footprints, less coverage of the site, and also less square footage of the homes themselves. And so with that reduction in square footage, size of the homes, it's helped reduce the massing of the homes themselves. Uh-oh. And so we have one single story, and then we have, of course, 4 two-story plans. 3 of the 2-story plans are the single-family detached, and then Plan 5 is the duplex 2-story plan. And 2 of the plans, the single-family detached, have 2-car garages, and 2 have 3-car garages. Again, and we've changed the configurations of the garages, so there's just less. For a 60-foot wide house, they have less garage forward. They have some front porches and just quite a bit of articulation, again, with reducing some of the massing on the homes themselves. Of course, the single-story reduced massing to the sides of these homes. And then also, as you go through the package, you'll see that the rears have also quite a bit of reduced massing. The larger plan, which is the Plan 4, I'll get to that. But again, if you look through the package you have, you'll see that the rears have, very aesthetic rear elevations with less massing than you would expect. And front porches, less garage. These are 2-car garages on the plans 1 and 2. Plan 3 has a 3-car garage. And then Plan 4 also has a 3-car garage, with one of them turned sideways, so you only see 2 from the street. And this particular plan, also what we've done with it, it is the larger plan at 3150, but it does have the master bedroom on the first floor to reduce the massing at the second floor. And if you look at the rear elevation in your package, you'll see it's, for the most part, single story across the rear. And again, that's just to kind of reduce the massing, because it is the concern of the rears was a great concern as far as the way this sets up. It's a little elevated for the rears and where it's seen from long distances. And in addition to the modifications we've made to the architecture, I'll just go over with, we've increased the, as far as the styles, it has a more eclectic mix of architecture now that we've introduced the Spanish and the farmhouse with a different siding, board and bat siding onto it, and some different roof materials, and then also some richer colors, deeper colors into the mix. So there's a stronger contrast in the architecture, and there's also differences between the roof pitches. There's just a variety. It's just a stronger variety than what was proposed before, with more of a just kind of a Mediterranean style architecture is what we proposed for the total project before. So we've kind of mixed it up, taking instructions and guidance from staff to move in this direction. So we'll go this way. And then with these 2 homes, it's actually the duplex. There are one of them is around 1,400 square feet. The other one's a little over 16. It's 100 square feet. They're 2 stories. They're 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms. Very family-oriented homes. And the way they're oriented as far as they are the affordable, but they each have their front door and their garage on separate streets because they sit on corner lots. So and they kind of fit the massing of the larger single-family homes. So I think staff, as I mentioned earlier, I think is kind of prepped very well as far as the architecture and all the changes we've made. And that's it for me. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, any questions at this point from the council? Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thank you very much. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, I got about 15 cards. You guys want to take about anybody care for about a 5-10 minute break? Anybody? Okay, let's take a brief break here, and then we'll go into the public hearing. Thank you very much for your for the staff report, and so we'll be back here in about 10 minutes. Thank you. Good evening, and welcome back to round 2 of the April 22nd meeting of the Livermore City Council. We just completed the staff report for 5.02, the Garaventa project, and now we're coming up on the public hearing on that. So I've got currently 16 cards for the public hearing. We want to be able to hear from everybody, so I'd ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And if you agree with somebody, you can raise your hand and let us know. So with that, I have John Satora, Marnie Steele, and Michaela Morrow. Mr. Satori.
Good morning or afternoon, John Satora, Tiffany Common. Others here will talk to the native species and natural habitat concerns questioning the EIR. I'll do that. I do ask that the council provide some transparency tonight and disclose which members, if any, have walked the project or the trail to the south to get a better visual than the renderings presented tonight. The visuals from the Tiffany area clearly show that these houses are going to be a blight of the whole hills. For people using that trail from even the west side of Vasco, then when they walk that trail to the parks or to the school, it's going to be an eyesore. This is a bad fit for the area. To get to this point, you've seen the different iterations that they've brought forth. The bridge, no bridge, and the way it's now designed, the traffic every day is going to have an extra mile to connect at Bear Creek Road just to get to Altamont Creek School or any other service in Livermore. This is not promoting the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions as required in State Bill 743. SB 743 requires cities and counties to incorporate vehicle miles traveled in traffic modeling rather than level of service, with the goal of reducing the miles traveled. You cannot find a more remote place to locate a subdivision within Livermore's boundaries. Vehicle miles in this area cannot be mitigated with a bicycle or foot travel, as the city has no bike lanes or pedestrian paths crossing 580 east of 1st Street. Accessing the city or the largest employer of the lab from this area on bike is a death-defying endeavor. City Manager Mark Roberts previously remarked at his previous City Council meeting that the double-edged sword that is State Bill 743 is that building a subdivision far away from everything can result in a perfect level of service. However, the travel time is lengthened, going directly against the miles traveled provision of the bill. Building in an urban area, there would be problems with level of service. I asked the council to look into level of service of Livermore at this point. I think we are far from perfect at the northeast section of Livermore. And I'd like to know how that's comparable to the rest of Livermore's level of service from fire and police department. Anecdotals are always fun, but I'll give you 2. Just today, we had a fire department call out after about 30 minutes of a fire alarm sounding in my neighborhood. I actually went out and checked on the house. I saw them moving around, but then about 30 minutes later, I heard the fire department show up. Earlier this week, I was walking my neighborhood, and a resident had complained to me about another resident who had assaulted him, and he was still waiting for about 3 hours for the police to show up to take his report on that assault. This was an elderly man who had another person's dog put to chase on him. So in the end, the zoning may be right, the plan may be feasible, the environmental impact may be minimal if you have faith in the EIR, but it's the wrong thing to do. City Council, Marshawn, what you said is the commission decides whether it could be done, but the council decides whether or not it makes sense with the larger picture in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Satori. Marnie Steele, Michaela Morrow, Ken Brook.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Marnie Steele. I reside at 1996 Meadow Glen Drive, and I am here with the Save the Hill group. And tonight I'm speaking on behalf of Cindy Angers. She's a founding member of our group, but she's unable to attend tonight, and I have her written speech here, so I'm going to give you Cindy's comments. As some of you have seen, the Save the Hill group is a very dedicated, well-organized, and passionate group. Thank you to you, council members and city staff, that have recently met with our group to discuss the impacts of the proposed development. And thank you for reviewing the documents we have submitted. Some of you provided a bit of feedback on those, and we really do appreciate it. As you can see, the access to this proposed development is problematic. Access on Hawk Street adds to the already impacted elementary school traffic, and having a solitary access on Bear Creek creates its own major issues. There should be 2 access points for this development. Ideally, one at Dalton-Vasco intersection, but we're told that's not feasible. So if we are indeed forced to consider the second access road at Hawk, then it should be a real access point. It should be a true 2-lane road and bridge. The scary 2017 and 18 wildfires here in California are a new and very real threat. We have to address this awful issue. Smarter decisions can hopefully avoid disasters, such as the total destruction in Paradise, California. So, if and when there is a wildfire on the hill, we need to allow folks to escape from this development, or allow them to enter it to rescue their children, their elderly, and their pets. This unfortunately means a 2-lane, unbollarded, unrestricted bridge on Hawk. We hate to even suggest this idea. This will increase traffic at the school, create possible vehicular collisions with the many Creek Trail users, and has a huge impact on the sensitive Altamont Creek. But if we have to choose one evil over another, this is the lesser of 2 evils. Please consider this in your review this evening of this proposed flawed development. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Steele. Michaela Morrow, Ken Brook, Julia Benguigui, sorry.
Hi, my name is Michaela, and I oppose the development of the Garaventa Hills project. I will be speaking about the city's already in place guidelines, which go against the proposed project. This open space, which contains Altamont Hills, creeks, and knolls, are an official historic scenic resource of Livermore, which the city declared in Chapter 26 revised project assessment. It plays an important role in the residents' daily lives. The residents recognize this area as a cultural importance, which makes where we live have this particular character and identity. This proposed plan will destroy that character and identity. The city of Livermore has set certain guidelines and procedures to protect historical resources. Please follow your own guidelines and policies and protect this historical site in Livermore. The city has goals to maintain Livermore's character identity according to your standards. One of these goals is to maintain current resident views of the visual benefits. According to the general open space guidelines, views and visual access intent, it states that the city will ensure that the views which are unique and specific to Livermore are preserved from residential development. This plan will go against your intent to keep our views. We, the current residents, will not have the views of the hills and knolls because of this development. You report that the project will substantially alter the views of identified scenic resources from nearby public areas. Therefore, the impact related to scenic vistas is less than significant. According to the reports, your reports, less than significant. I call BS. You are permanently destroying 32 acres of land, which we cannot get back. Yes, that is significant. At any angle from Altamont Creek Drive, Bear Creek Drive, the Bluffs, Tiffany Common, Garaventa Ranch Road, Altamont Creek Elementary School, and many, many, many other streets, the views will be blocked. Ask the residents who live there, not some report or pictures that you see up here. The plan has too many 2-story homes, which will block our views of the hills and knolls. And on Earth Day, let's talk about the environment. Your impact bioreport states that approximately 32 acres of grassland habitat will be permanently removed. An additional 1.1 acres will be temporarily disturbed for construction of the bridge and access road over the creek. How can you say that this removal of grasslands is not significant when we have the special status species which are known to use the habitat? The proposed site, which will be permanently and temporarily destroyed, has potential to support these endangered species and is significant for the breeding of Vernal Pool Fairy shrimp, California tiger salamander, western spade Blackfoot toad, and nesting birds. Tell me why this project is okay to destroy endangered species and potential future species. Your loss disturbance report of habitats clearly states a significant impact. Why aren't we paying more attention to this? Since the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services determined most of these species are at the endangered and threatened level, why are we even considering this project? They are federally protected. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act and Fish Game Code of California protects the nesting birds, which we have at the hills and knolls. Why are you even thinking of allowing a development to destroy a protected species and its habitat? If necessary, I'm sure the residents of Livermore will take the necessary measurements to make aware the national level. Why is this not only a bad idea, but a bad idea? Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Brooks, Julia, and Karen Crossley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to address this issue. The proposed development plan shows that there's only one way in and one way out. Now, I'm speaking from being evacuated from my home down in Southern California, and I've experienced how fast a wind-driven fire can travel. I mean, it is scary. And right now, this plan proposal wants to have approximately, I think it'll be over 200 homes that would be trapped if the road, Laughlin Road, were to be blocked at Altamont Creek Road. You know, that's crazy to me. I don't understand. We should have learned from the Paradise Fire, and even today, they are re-looking at their communities to make sure they have more than one way out. The proposed bridge, quote unquote, emergency exit that was being planned or is being planned is not going to be used by first responders. I've asked them about that. They say no. No, seconds, minutes are very important to us. We cannot risk trying to blast through a school zone area on an emergency. We'll go around. The other thing is that with this proposal, since there's only one way in and one way out, all of the commercial traffic for construction, the heavy equipment, will either have to come past our school and around to Bear Creek to get into the development. And by the way, right now, the parks are just full of kids playing soccer and baseball. Cars are parked either side. It's a mess. And you ask any mother here, any parent, right, who picks up their children from that school, they refer to that triangle at the school as the triangle of hell, because you got parents of 600 kids trying to get in and out to pick up their children. And let's make this worse. Let's make that an emergency exit. Are you kidding me? An emergency exit that's going to dump right into the backyard of the school? It just does not make any sense. It's very unsafe. And I've got 30 seconds because I need to bring this up again. When I moved here, which is just about a year now, one of the first things I looked at was Vasco, right? And at Vasco and I forget the name of the road, the traffic light that would take, if that road were to continue up into the development, Dalton, thank you, yes, you would have a 4-way lane highway that would be able to deliver all of the equipment, all of the earth-moving equipment, and all the construction workers into that development without having to drive it through our school, past our parks, and through residential areas. It makes so much sense to go that way. I asked this question at the last meeting, and after it was at the planning meeting, and there was a silence, because I asked, why wasn't Vasco looked at? And then someone went, well, I think it was drainage issues. That was the reason given. I think, oh my goodness me. You know, with all the other issues that we have, and especially the safety issues, we talk a lot about the planning and the houses and development and architecture, nothing about the roads. It's not a good plan. It's very ill-conceived. And thank you, and I'm sorry that I took a little extra time, but it's quite emotional.
Thank you, Mr. Brook. Julia, and if you could pronounce your last name for me, please.
Yeah, Julia Bengigi.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So I'm a mother of a child who goes to Altamont Creek Elementary. My daughter will also be going in a couple of years. I moved to this area, this specific area, for the open space, for nature, for views of the hills, not no overcrowding. I think a new development would tarnish all of this. So I'm against any further development for the above reasons. And just as important, for the safety of my children, as Ken referenced, it is so crowded in the morning. There's so much traffic at drop-off, even at pickup. We don't need more people. We don't need more cars there. And I just don't want more pollution. I don't want more cars, like I said, that endanger my kids. And I don't want more congestion around the drop-off and pickup. The pollution from the construction for long periods of time, dust that the kids will be breathing. It's just the way that I picture my kids at school and playing, and this project, it's just chaos, and I just oppose it.
Thank you. Karen Crossley, Ted Crossley, Mary Perner.
Karen Crossley at 1424 Fox Creek Court. I've always wondered why Garaventa Hills was ever considered an appropriate place to build houses. It's hard to build on. It has a diverse ecology. Why had it been zoned for housing in the first place? And as I looked into it, it appeared that it happened around the time Mira Lisa was built. And while I understand that we all like to make money on our investments, most of us can't do so because it goes against the general plan. Looking further into the general plan, I found out that as far back as the 70s, the general plan has stated that Livermore should not build on hills. I'm sorry, they're not knolls. Yes, you want to present it as knolls, but they call them hills, Garaventa Hills, so they must think they're hills too. Anyway, it appears that the general plan has never been followed. So the question becomes, is the general plan just a piece of paper that is followed when it's convenient or ignored when it isn't convenient? So what needs to be done for the city to follow its own rules, even if a lawsuit is the outcome? We need to follow the rules, and if the city doesn't follow its own rules, why do you expect the citizens to follow the rules? And I also would just like to add that the thought that these duplexes are affordable is laughable. I have children that have college degrees that cannot afford these houses in Livermore. And I find that they're all planning on moving. So we will be the only ones left in this town, and they have spent their lives here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crossley. Ted Crossley, Mary Perner, and Mary Ann Rocha.
For the record, my legal name is Verlin Crossley, and Ted Crossley is a nickname. Good evening, council members and guests, and Mayor Marchand. We have debated the Garaventa Hills development for 7 years. I again want to point out that the development has never complied with the Livermore City's general plan and still doesn't. This development should have been rejected when proposed 7 years ago. It should have been rejected when it was reproposed and reproposed and reproposed. It has been revised yearly, but still proposes building houses on Garaventa Hills. The hills are an ecologically sensitive area that is home to several species that cannot be relocated, and whose habitats will be destroyed by the builders' tractors and graders. Although that may not be endangered yet, they are part of our ecosystem that adds to the uniqueness and desirability of this area. The hills are not suitable for housing in their present form because they're not level, have rock formations that need to be removed or moved. Either way, the skyline and character of the hills will be destroyed. Access roads to the homes will be visible and will increase traffic on Bear Creek and Hawk. Hawk Street is narrow and goes past Almont Creek School. A new 2-lane bridge at the end of Hawk is intended to provide access for the fire department and act as an emergency exit for the Hills residents. Even then, access for firefighting equipment will be very limited, and Hawk Street will certainly not accommodate fire equipment entering and residents leaving at the same time. The only upside to this development is that it would generate or increase Livermore's real estate taxes by approximately probably $40 million. I don't know. Of course, the loss of the hills as an undeveloped area will make the property of existing homeowners less desirable. The skyline of undeveloped hills is something to be preserved. The skyline of a housing development is not acceptable as an alternative. The city, if wanted to develop these hills, should have changed the plan years ago to accommodate the development of hilling areas. But that would have been challenged by the voters. Have no doubts. The voters like the general plan as it is, and we are upset because you are not following it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crosley. Mary Perner, Mary Ann Rocha, Graham Taliber.
Good evening, Your Honor and council members. My presence here is somewhat impromptu. I had a conversation prior to Christmas with a good friend, Mary Putoff, who cannot be here this evening. Now, I understand that she has spoken in front of this group in the past on this topic of the Garaventa Hills proposed development, and that she spoke eloquently. I'm sure that I have not prepared and that I don't have the facts and figures, but I am convinced by Mary's passion that this proposed development may be a violation, that the hill that is behind Garaventa School is one of the stepping stones going up to Brushy Peak, which has been a site, a sacred site for the Ohlone and other tribes historically, and is still honored in that way. I believe that it serves as a beautiful, lovely, peaceful background, and that it will be destroyed. I honor what these people are saying, and I respect their arguments. And so basically, again, in honor of Mary and her beliefs, I hope that you will not grant this development the go-ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perner. Mary Ann Rocha, Graham Taliber, Andrew Barker.
Good evening, Mayor Marchand, City Council members and staff. My name is Mary Ann Rocha, and I live at 1787 Sterling Court in Livermore. I'm representing the sellers in the sale of this property to Lafferty Communities. Their names are Sharon Albright and Karen Red Elk. They would very much have liked to have been here, but they are very elderly, and they live in Berkeley, and they cannot drive at night. This project has been in the planning since 2010. It's been through numerous reviews in the city, and the plans were revised based on what the planning department as well as the city council desired, going from the 76 to the 44 with the duet units. I'm going to reiterate some of the things that were said today. The square footage on the homes have been reduced, the lot sizes have been increased, the building heights reduced to have less impact on the neighbors. The project conforms to the current zoning, which is low residential land use. The EIR report has said there's no significant impact to the environment. The lot sizes and styles of homes is consistent with the nearby homes in the Bluffs, in Altamont Creek, and the Mara Lisa development. Livermore has a very diverse population and needs diversity in housing. In fact, we need all kinds of housing, as I'm a realtor and I can attest to that. Many of the newer developments are 2- and 3-story condos, townhomes, plus single-family homes on very minimal-sized lots, mostly with no backyards and small patios or even balconies. This development provides that diversity. The Garaventa Hills does have open space, walking paths, and concern for the environment. The emergency access, which is also a pedestrian bridge, will allow for the families to walk their kids to school and back from school in the afternoon. Oh, sorry, I'm almost done. I want to commend Lafferty Homes for the excellent design of the project and their dedication to making significant changes to satisfy the Planning Commission and City Council recommendations. Thank you very much for allowing me this time.
Thank you, Ms. Roja. Graham Taliber, Andrew Barker, and Michelle Mitchell. Mr. Taliber.
Hi, everyone. My name's Graham Taliber. I don't live at the Hill, but I love it. First off, I just want to say, looking for California tiger salamanders is one of my favorite hobbies. They're actually really special salamanders known as mole salamanders because they spend almost the entire year underground in burrows and upland hills like the Garaventa Hill. Once a year in the middle of the night, and only on the rainiest nights of the year, the California tiger salamanders make a migration to vernal pools at lower elevations where they breed. This is virtually the only time you can see a tiger salamander. They don't leave tracks, and they use ground squirrel burrows as homes, so evidence of their existence outside of these rainy nights is basically non-existent. The data in the EIR that suggests there's only 0.004 acres of CA tiger salamander habitat on the Garaventa Hill is extremely dated and would be debated by any qualified biologist. This was mentioned in the Planning Commission meeting and has not been resolved. Livermore started off with 1,000 acres of this awesome habitat called an alkali sink. The health and existence of this habitat is entirely dependent upon the hydrologic cycle and the hydrologic significance of the hills surrounding the habitat. This alkali sink habitat is the habitat that surrounds the hill. It is also the only habitat our city's flower, the Livermore tar plant, can be found in. Unfortunately, the original 1,000 acres of alkali sink has been reduced by 50% to 500 acres. The Livermore tar plant, along with a handful of other critically endangered plants and animals that call the alkali sink home, are clinging to existence. Any further loss or damage to this habitat is ecological disaster. As it is now, the mitigation property proposed cannot ever be developed due to the Endangered Species Act, as large portions of the property are tiger salamander, western spadefoot, and red-legged frog habitat. This is why the property currently exists as a public preserve, the Livermore Wetlands Preserve. Go check it out. It's an awesome park. This property has already been preserved, so mitigation using this property has absolutely no added ecological benefit and is an entire scam. Finally, I'd like to address that the EIR provided at the Planning Commission meeting was performed before the statuses of several species that are found in the alkali sink had changed. I'd also like to say this is the snakiest and most ecologically inconsiderate EIR I have ever seen, given the number of special status species that exist in our alkali sink and its upland counterpart, the Garaventa Hill. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew Barker, Michelle Mitchell, Brent Seiler.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Barker. I'm a resident of Livermore. I'm here to encourage you to approve this development. We desperately need more housing in Livermore. Let me briefly address the environmental concerns. Our main problem we face environmentally is global warming, and the main cause of that is vehicle travel. So the 44 families that could be living here don't disappear if the houses aren't built. If the houses aren't built, those families are commuting from Modesto and causing much more environmental harm than the building of this development. So I encourage you to approve. The development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Michelle Mitchell, Brent Seiler, Luann Tung.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to oppose the proposed Garaventa Hills project, and I support the technical flaws that the Save the Hill group has presented to the city and to Council and you, the Mayor, as well. I had a whole thing written out of what I wanted to talk about, and then after hearing the comments, I've changed my mind a little bit, so I apologize. It's not going to be as polished as I had started out, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. I'd like to start out with part of my original plan, and that's to talk a little bit about the possibility of preserving it as open space. In a few years, the city will be reevaluating the general plan. The property in question was rezoned in 2003 to a lower density zone. Is it possible that during the general plan of reevaluation, the city can take the time to look once again at rezoning this property so that it may remain open space? Given the city's history of preserving open space and hillsides, the city's current general plan, and the city's work with the Altamont Landfill Open Space Committee on recommended list of priority areas for future acquisition in eastern Alameda County, I'd like to request that the city consider working with other local agencies, the Save the Hill Group, to secure funding from the Altamont Landfill Open Space Committee and partnering with a local park district or districts to preserve this area as open space. I also forgot in the beginning, I wanted to thank the council members who took the time to come out and take a look at the beautiful hill. We appreciate that. And the city staff for the time that they've spent with us. We really appreciate that as well. So the other things that came up while listening to other people, I'll quickly go through. They're talking about putting a trail system in this new development, a specific trail system, a maintained trail system. They're hooking that up to a landscape maintenance district, which is behind my home. It is not a maintained trail. It's my understanding that landscape maintenance districts are set amounts of budget. So you're going to hook up trails to something that isn't even a trail or part of the current landscape maintenance district budget. So as a resident, I oppose that. I oppose the fact that you're trying to connect things that shouldn't be there anyway. The fire danger, I'm befuddled by that, that the fire department doesn't think that adding more trees and having hills of grass in between a residential area is a good idea, and fire danger in light of what other people have said about the recent fire dangers. Having dry grass in that enclosed area, I can tell you as a resident, fireworks get set off out there, and you're just adding more people and more dangers to a more concentrated area. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Brent Seiler, Luann Tung, and Bianca Cavelli.
Good evening, council members, staff. I will have to give it to the Save the Hill group. They've done a fantastic job in trying to identify alternatives as well as problems that they have. For me, I go back to our history, more recent history, the Butte Fire, where the flames traveled at 800 yards a minute. And when you look at that space, how defensible is it going to be? We build the stack and pack houses where fires can go from one to the other. And it's not the low running fires that we got to worry about, but it's the embers that it generates and it puts up into the air with all the wind that we get from that area coming down in through Livermore. One thing that was brought up even by staff is kind of the layout of the area. I mean, the group's been fighting this for almost 10 years now. So it's pretty obvious residents don't want this. The developer wants to make money. The people who have the land want to make money. It's a money-making deal. So let's give them their money. Let them set a price. Let's do what we did for the other preservation area. Let's get money from other towns where they need to be able to pay into a fund. Have them pay into this. Let's make it contagious, just like the city planner said we should. And that way it's all under one umbrella. People get paid for their land, for their effort. We get to preserve the area. I personally would like to see it preserved versus having housing going in there based on what the residents want that live there. I've got friends that live there. Right now they have a view of the hills and the knolls. When these houses come in, they're going to be having people look on from their houses down onto them. And that's not what they bought. and that's what they're going to get. So I oppose having this go forward. I'd like to see a different alternative plan.
Thank you, Mr. Seiler. Luann Tung, Bianca Cavelli, and Dennis Kai.
Mayor Marchand and members of the council, my name is Luann Tung. I live at 2157 Tea Garden Common in Marilisa Courtyard. I represent not only myself as a neighbor to Garaventa Hills, but also Friends of the Arroyos and Center for Biological Diversity. The first time I saw tonight was the view from Tiffany, which is my neighborhood. And it's clearly that image of the houses completely covering the top of the hill, because we're close, unlike Vasco Road, which gave a very misleading view before, that is not subordinate to the landforms. So the top of the hill's obscured from that area. So I suggest that if this project gets approved, that it should be one-story homes on the side facing Marilisa Courtyards, Altamont Creek Elementary, and the Bluffs, so that it has less of an impact on the view. Put all the two-story homes on the back side. I wanted to mention a big concern that I just had. I learned recently in Marilisa Courtyards, so we're like, packed houses, and we're across Tiffany and across the creek from all that open space. Their fire insurance has been canceled just because we are close to an open space. So now you have these new houses. Basically, it's a wind tunnel. It's usually very windy up there a lot. And you have this grassland area, which has been known, there's been fires that have blown through there. And now you're adding trees and houses. And as Brett mentioned earlier, when the trees go, the ashes blow. And now generally the people in the bluffs are downwind from the direction that the wind is blowing. So now you have fuel, you have trees. Before you just had grass, it blew through and they could stay on top of it. But now you have houses and trees, and all the extra trees that they're suggesting in the landscape, I think is a really bad idea to have it in a wind tunnel in a fire-prone area. So I think those people are going to have a difficult time buying fire insurance in that area, given the past recent history of our more fire-prone environment in California. I also want to add that the survey mentioned, the environmental survey mentioned, that they did not find any species of special concern or native plants. And I provided pictures to planning staff and as well as Councilwoman Monroe of pictures that I took of burrowing owls on the property, pictures that I took of quite a few native plants on the property. So, and I'm not a professional surveyor, but I know what to look for because I'm out there all the time. Just wanted to point that out. Let's see. I'm also concerned with, I think this was mentioned earlier, but any change in water flow diverting away from or allowing it toward from the development into the direction of the rare plant alkali sink is unprecedented. There's no example of a residential area uphill of a rare plant alkali sink and how that hydrology is affected. So that you don't know, and you might be killing off the alkali sink plants by allowing that development. So I think the views from there are spectacular. It should be preserved for the public. It should be kept as open space. And I think it was a mistake in the very beginning to have allowed that to be developed for houses in the very beginning. So I urge you to vote on Earth Day, vote for Mother Earth, and say no to the development. Thank you.
Thank you. Bianca Cabelli, Dennis Key, Greg Scott.
Good evening. I'm Bianca Covarelli. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and staff. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to second everything in opposition that is said previously in opposition to this development. I've been a Livermore resident for 24 years, and I care about my community deeply. A few points. Happy Earth Day, first of all. I'm with Save the Hill Group. There are funds available. And we're working on collaborating with finding a buyer for this unique, beautiful space to maintain open space. A few points. The general plan specifically states no building on slopes, hills, or knolls. Why is this development even being considered? The general plan needs to be honored here. Per LARPD limited tree planting, okay, but we're looking at two-story homes perching for raptors to pose threats to existing burrowing owls. We have current photos and videos showing their existence right now. My question is, why were there no visual views of impacts from the bluffs, which will show specific impacts visually? We haven't seen that. We saw different perspectives with very minimal impacts, and that's not the case. So I'd like to ask for visuals from the bluffs, because that's where all of the impact is going to be shown, and those are hills and slopes. So my other question is, have there been recent testing and core drillings of seismic activity in the area? The last report was done over 10 years ago. Has that been done or even requested? Because we've had recent seismic activity within the last 10 years, I would imagine. What's the bridge slope? The last thing that I read was it was indicated at 5.9% to 6.81%, that it's 13 feet high. Keep in mind that Altamont grade is 2 to 4%. That's a big significant difference between 5.9 and 6.8%, isn't it? That leads a dangerous situation for the bridge. That's not even conceivable, actually, as an emergency exit point. And if we're going to talk about the bridge, in addition, a one-lane bridge is inadequate in case of emergencies for 44 homes. If Laughlin, which is the only existing one-way in and one-way out, one-way in, one-way out, if Laughlin for any reason is blocked, you're not only blocking the 44 homes, you're blocking all the other existing homes in the entire area. I just think this needs to be reevaluated. This is a wind tunnel. I live there. I know. I experience it on a daily basis. We're talking wind tunnel. I have seen personally fires, and they go through that field like seconds. We're not talking minutes. We're talking seconds. Now you're adding, again, what Luann just said about the houses, trees. You're adding major fuel. It's going from one point of instant, easy dealing with grass where they can break it off to homes, embers. I recently had a conversation with a friend who, yes, her fire insurance was canceled due to the fact that we're in a wind tunnel, which is a risk and a danger, especially in light of all the fires that we've had in California. It's a serious concern and an issue. Without fire insurance and insurance for these homes, you don't get loans. Sorry. This is an environmentally and ecologically sensitive, very unique hill that should be honored and left untouched and pristine and maintained open space. This is not a consciously buildable site. Our goal from Save the Hill Group is to maintain this unique open space, to maintain safety for our community. Thank you for your understanding. And thank you for understanding this is such a sensitive site. You know, it's like comparing apples to oranges anywhere else. The nature of the wind tunnel, the fire hazards, the rolling hills, slopes, and knolls, which are indicated in the general plan to be protected, not builded on. And I'm asking you to vote consciously tonight and honor Earth Day and oppose this plan. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Covarelli. Dennis Key and Greg Scott.
Thank you for the time. The name's Dennis Kai. I'm at 1658 Knoll Way. I live at the almost at the corner of Bear Creek and Knoll Way. And that's going to lead into the access point of this proposed development, which I totally oppose. I'm for development. Believe me, I'm truly for development, but that's for smart development. And again, this is not smart development. You've heard a lot of comments from my neighbors. You've heard a lot of comments, and in the past, we have folks that want to be here that can't be here. And they're probably 5 times the numbers, 10 times the numbers that you see here. From that perspective, I just want to kind of go back a little bit in history in 2015. From the Mercury News is that the City Council on Monday declined to give the green light to a plan to build 47 homes. That's down from the 76 that you guys really wanted to put up there. You talked about it would jeopardize sensitive wildlife, increase traffic, and violate the general plan. It still does that. What has changed? The council unanimously agreed not to certify the final environmental plan of the Garaventa Ranch Hills. And so from that perspective, you said the council members expressed reservations about how the project would affect visibility of nearby hills. You know, the only reason I remembered to come here wasn't because I wasn't concerned about the hills. I was going for a walk in between that path between the school and the hills. And when I looked over there, I looked at my wife and I said, that's destroyed. If they build this, and I said, oh my God, that meeting is tonight. So we had to cut our walk short and get down here. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it. But what has changed? Truly, what has changed? You're talking about visibility. We're talking to you about the safety of the residents. We're talking to you about the environmental impact. There was a time you said there was a fire. I told you back then I saw one, if not two, spotted owls, or at least I saw a ground burrowing owl on either side. And then there was a fire, and the comment came out, what happened to those animals? Well, we had another person said they took pictures and found 7 ground burrowing owls out there now. 7. These are endangered species. And mitigation is not going to save them. You're going to destroy their habitat, as you will toward the other endangered species. In that report on the Mercury News back then, they talked to you about it, and the letter that came to you from the environmental attorney that also talked about all the different endangered species. What have we done about it? So you've got safety, you've got the views. What's really changed? I really don't think, the comment that came to us from Lafferty as we were the last person that got up to speak, if anything that was said here tonight were to be believed, I would say the same thing about their project. My concern is not just the visibility, it's about the safety, and it's also about the environmental impact. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kai. Greg Scott.
Greg Scott. So I hear 2 categories of concern here, the environmental concerns and the flood danger concerns. And I've lived in Northern California for a number of decades now, and I would be very concerned with the flood danger. I've been to many of these meetings in the City Council, and the February 2017 storms where you went on and on about the $650,000 for the Arroyo Mocho repair. When you look at the hydrologic data, I just wonder how you're planning for it. For example, what's called ARC storms. ARC is atmospheric river 1,000-year storms. This comes under the Multi-Hazards Demonstration Project of the USGS. And there's a little problem here because they don't happen to be 1,000-year storms. They're every 200 years or less. But we haven't had one in a while. The last time we had one was in 1861 to 1862 when the capital of California was flooded and had to be moved. But from sediment levels and studies, it's found that these storms occur every 100 to 200 years, and they occur 50% of the time with more they're stronger storms than what happened to the 1861-1862 storm. That was the time when it rained 66 inches in Los Angeles. So I'm wondering about the flooding and how you plan for the flooding in this project when our hydrologic data seems to be rather limited. On the environment, it was expressed that concern for carbon dioxide pollution from commuters, and that's a valid concern. We're looking at 44 houses and the carbon dioxide emissions from the 44 houses. Now, I don't want to downplay that, but in 44 houses, the carbon dioxide emissions in a state that's putting out 500 million tons of carbon dioxide per year, that's a concern. Our number one environmental concern is nitrogen. That comes from our agriculture, and phosphorus concerns. And then our number 3 problem is biodiversity and genetic diversity. We are losing a lot of our biodiversity and genetic diversity. And how we know that is a little system called LIDAR. It's light, distance, and ranging. And we have the satellites up there and aircraft, and we are losing our biodiversity and genetic diversity like mad, and we're just taking it out piece by piece. This is just another piece of it. So we have to weigh certain things here, and $650,000 compared to what could happen in an atmospheric river storm that's not in your plan out of the 100-year parameter could be a lot of money.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. And last comment card, Cindy Angers. just got in under the wire?
Sorry?
I said, just got in under the wire? You made it.
I won't tell you how fast I sped here. Hi, my name is Cindy Angers. I'm at 1499 Winding Stream Drive here in Livermore. I'm here with the Save the Hill group. Forgot my shirt, sorry. First off, I do want to thank council members and city staff for working with the Save the Hill group for what, 7 years now? It's amazing. I think this working together has so far been really beneficial. I'm kind of shocked. Thank you. But anyway, there's still some flaws, as you have heard, with the project. One thing that I don't think I was told hasn't been mentioned yet is, you know, as you have heard, we would really like to arrange to buy the hill, keep it as open space in perpetuity, open space in perpetuity, forever. Buy the hill. That's our goal here. We're not looking at just an 8 or 10 year option. And I'm really curious why the developer hasn't bought the hill. Why are they just doing an option? Are they concerned that this will never go through because of all the technical flaws? I don't know. Maybe you can ask them. So anyway, I just wanted to share that thought with you guys, and I really, truly am kind of impressed to have Livermore work so well with its residents. I think it's kind of remarkable. So thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, with that, that's the last of the cards that I have. So I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Questions from the council at this point?
I had one. Quick one, yeah. I just want to know what we've heard a little bit from the speakers about we're violating the general plan. Could anybody elaborate on that, please? Of staff, of course.
Sure. The general plans designated this property as residential back in the 1976 plan. It was designated for 1 to 5 acre sites. It was in 1988, the Area A general plan amendment occurred, and that changed it from the 1 to 5 acre sites to it was 2 to 3 to the acre. And then in the 2003 general plan, it was downzoned a bit because of the unknown environmental constraints in the property. So the property's been residential for a number of years. When you look at the goals, objectives, and principles that we analyzed to determine whether or not it's consistent or not, look at the entire series of goal, objectives, and policies. For example, there's a goal that says preserve and enhance Livermore's natural setting. There's a policy that says the city shall permit no intensive development of the hills. If you stop there, it'd be pretty clear. But then it adds a few sentences under which conditions that it would be okay to develop on those tough sites. And that is where you get to making it subordinate to the natural landforms, trying to cluster the units, you move them down off the hills, preserve the ridge lines, that sort of idea. So it's sort of a clustering principle. So that's one example of how we as staff look at a general plan goal. You take it in its entirety. So the property has a residential general plan designation, and it follows the goals and strategies to try and minimize the impacts to the natural landforms.
Okay, Councilmember Monroe, questions, comments, questions at this point?
I have a bunch of questions. Should I just run through them?
Sure.
Okay. I wanted to go. So we've heard these. These are basically reiterating some of the questions we've just heard. I wanted to go back to the fires, the trees, the wind tunnel, and how that would play out, and maybe hear a little bit more in detail how that could work out. And in the event of an emergency. Should I just read all the questions and then get them answered, or go one at a time here? What's easier?
One at a time.
One at a time.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So could I get that one answered first?
I'm sorry, Councilmember Monroe, can you please repeat that?
Sure. I wanted, so I had asked prior to public comment about fires and floods, and those came up again several times with concern that maybe the answer, I wanted an answer that was a little bit more in depth than the one prior to public comment.
Sure. So our building code and our fire and safety codes require certain construction practices to minimize impacts from fire, including providing fire sprinklers in all of these buildings, which they will do. It's been reviewed to ensure there are enough fire hydrants that are adequately spaced to fight any sort of structure fire that might occur, and also with distances to pull hoses to places where there aren't a hydrant. So from that perspective, the infrastructure's in place to take on a blaze if it were to occur, either in the natural areas or the developed lots. And again, our departments looked at it for adequate access, loading on the street, the emergency vehicle access bridge has been reviewed and found to be adequate. And regarding the flood issues, like I mentioned, these homes are actually quite a lot higher than many of the homes out there. So they're well out of the floodplain for Altamont Creek. And so that's a concern that we've touched on it in the environmental documents, and it's adequately cited to avoid damage from floods.
Okay. So I know that this is the last, the Mara Lisa development, as I understand it, was had 3 hills, correct? Is this hill, how does this hill differ from the other 2?
These are a little bit higher, and there's a hill that's just to the east that's similar in height. That's been set aside, sort of similar to this project that it's sort of behind Knoll Court and Bear Creek. So the development is basically clustered off of that hillside and tucked along Bear Creek Road. And then there's a hill that perhaps our city manager could talk about its exact location, but that is now covered with homes.
Yeah, that was actually the 4th hill of the cluster there, and that was located south of the creek area. And that area was graded, so you can actually still see the remnants of that in the actual height of the street out there, but that area was developed as part of the original development.
Violation of Native American territory. Any question on that?
So we're obligated to consult with our recognized tribes and spokesmen or spokespersons, and so they had an opportunity to look at this, and we recognize that Brushy Peak is a significant resource, and this basically this project is far enough south so that it's not part of that holding. It is the tribes that have lived here over the years regard the whole valley as a significant resource and sacred in many places, especially along creeks. And so when projects come along, we look at that very carefully and try and address their concerns and comments as best we can, and as well as avoiding work in the creeks when we can do that.
So this was part of the EIR, and the recognizing that there's not one community, there's not one person that speaks for everybody. It's what I'm hearing. Those people who were recognized agreed that this was okay to build on. Is that a correct interpretation of what you said? I'm not sure.
I don't think I would put those words.
Well, so okay.
So
Sorry.
they did not have unique objections to development in this area based on place. So you did hear that many of the tribes believe that development anywhere in the valley disturbs the overall ecological and sacredness of the area. There were not unique features of this particular landform that were identified, and if they had been, those would have been incorporated into our analysis.
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying. And the sightings of tiger, salamander, and burrowing owls that were not incorporated in the EIR.
So as I mentioned in the presentation, although we didn't find species when we were out there, we assumed that they could be on the entire site. So having found them on the site only confirms our assumptions that they could be on the entire site.
And if they do come across one during construction, the resource agency approved biologist who has to be on site will halt work, and they'll take corrective measures to avoid harming or taking a species.
Under both state and federal law, the appropriate action to deal with that particular potential habitat is the identification and acceptance of mitigation property. The staff has done pre-consultation on the mitigation property to see whether that's acceptable to address those particular species. And the findings is that it does. In fact, it is a higher value habitat, as your staff described earlier, based on what actually exists on those habitat mitigation areas.
And to that point, and then I'm going to leave some for other people. The question of this being the mitigation site never being developed anyway, so it doesn't really. I'm going to rephrase here. It doesn't count as a real trade. Could you speak to that as well?
Sure, and I'll just take that one. That it is true that it is privately held, and there are no conservation easements on it that would protect that in perpetuity. But the project is also heavily impacted by trespass, BMX bike jumps, motorcycles, RC cars, and trucks and things, and the damage that's ongoing there is significant. And so part of the mitigation on this would be to put a permanent conservation easement over that property, and also require the applicant, the developer, to provide an endowment, which is essentially a bank account that will earn enough interest to take care of that property in perpetuity, just based on the interest. And so they'll have to develop a management plan that will talk about that property and what's best for it. And then the endowment will be set at an amount appropriate to carry out that management in perpetuity, so it would be protected.
So in other words, right now, no, it won't get built on, but right now it is being destroyed as an ecological site in some ways. And I'm seeing some people in the back saying that's not correct, but so
And typical protective measures include things like fencing to try to prevent trespass and bicycle use and jumps and all the things that happen near existing housing.
Trespass is actually one of the major contributors to the deterioration of sites in the area. People taking both animals and themselves onto the site is a major problem for those, especially those flat areas, but even areas that have some topography to them. When people bring their animals on, that can be a significant impact to the site. And so one of the things is to fence the site appropriately and then to manage it in a ongoing manner.
So I don't know if this is okay or not, just I'm not sure about protocol, but as I was making my statement, I'm seeing some people saying in the back indicating that they strongly disagree. I don't know, what do we, let it go?
You have the floor.
Well, I'm curious to know what the objection is. But I don't know whether they get.
Well, so they've spoken,
Right.
and now we are. You're getting input from the staff. Yeah, so now it comes back to the council. So the council has the opportunity.
I could ask.
No, you're asking questions of the staff, and the staff is responding. We don't want to get to a point where somebody's going to say, "Well, I don't believe that."
Okay.
So it depends on who you believe.
I'm done. I'm finished. It's someone else's turn.
Okay. Okay. Vice Mayor Carling.
I've been out there too, and I've seen the hill being destroyed by bicycles and other people trespassing on the land as it is now. So I'm not exactly sure why you think that that's the wrong statement.
We're talking about the mitigation property.
No, I'm talking about what's going on there today.
We're talking about the mitigation.
No, I'm talking about, no, sir. I'm talking about what's going on today, which is the point that my council member was talking about. What's going on today, not the mitigation, what's going on today.
I'm talking about what's going on.
I know what you're talking
Please,
about.
sir. Please, sir.
I know what you're talking about. We're talking about two different things.
Two different properties, very far apart.
I know that. I'm well aware. Sir, it's my turn to talk. Sir.
Mr. Taliber, please. The council is.
No, that is not true.
Well, I have signs, I have pictures of the
Sir,
signs at the park.
we are now talking, not you.
You're asking
Mr. Taliber,
I told
please.
you that we're talking about different.
conversation.
You're right. The public has the opportunity to speak during the public
So they get to lie
forum.
to you and we don't get to rebuttal?
We're talking about
There's
two.
misinformation happening here. You guys have not been out there. You don't see the signs around the mitigation.
I thought I just said I've been out there.
Then there are signs around the mitigation property.
I'm not talking about.
Mr. Taliber, we are not
We are
talking
not
about the
talking about the
mitigation
mitigation
property.
property.
We are not talking about the mitigation property. We're talking about the site. The site is what we are talking about. Mr. Vice Mayor.
I'd like to talk about the road. And I spent some time out there, and Mr. Brooks said that he had never heard an answer to the question about Vasco. That's the question I asked the city manager, and can we get a reply on that again, please?
Putting a road through the wetlands to the immediate west of the site would be a significant environmental impact. The preserve that essentially is immediately to the west of the area where the project is located is sensitive. And in fact, as people have identified, that area does have sensitive species in it and essentially has a significant amount of wetlands in that area. So placing a road in that area, which was one of the things that was initially analyzed and rejected because of its significant environmental impact, while it would improve access, it would be a significant environmental impact. You're required, where feasible, to try and minimize or eliminate those environmental impacts. So that particular proposal was not carried forward in any of the development alternatives.
Thank you. And I think Councilmember Monroe addressed the issue of safety and concern about fires and emergency access. And can we just review that again, Mr. Stewart? I mean, we've had several different plans, one with no emergency access out Hawk, a 2-lane road that would require some re-engineering of the arroyo. And we've settled on, at this point anyway, is it a 1-lane or is it just a narrow 2-lane emergency vehicle access?
It's a 20-foot wide bridge with a 5-foot pedestrian raised sidewalk on it, and it's be open for bicyclists could use the roadway part or the sidewalk if they wanted to. So the initial proposal had a full 2-lane, 1 lane in each direction, and a sidewalk bridge that required realignment of the creek. During the public hearing for the environmental impact report, there was significant testimony that the neighbors were concerned with cut-through traffic and that it was an environmental impact. And based on that testimony, the applicant revised the project to remove that bridge. So therefore, that alleviated the significant environmental impact and left the sole access into and out of on Bear Creek Drive. So when it came before the council in September, the neighborhood and community basically said they were concerned about emergency access in the event the Laughlin Road becomes unusable due to a washout or some failure of the road or blockage. And so they asked for another way in and out of the development. And as your city manager explained, the access from Vasco Road is significant from an environmental impact perspective. Potentially could cut off flow into LARPD's Garaventa Wetlands Preserve. And so we looked at pretty much every other location to try and get a vehicular access into that site. And the only one that works is extending a bridge over the creek from Hawk Street. And so that's where we are today before you with the EVA.
And the EVA provides for emergency access into that site. So fire will use that in the event of emergency. Police can use it as well. Provide it responds to some of the issues. And if fire police want to open that up for vehicular egress in the event of an emergency, that's available as well. People can obviously walk or bicycle in and out through there.
I think there's some concern, though, still expressed by some that well, I guess two things. One is that there's presumption that the fire department is only going to go in through Bear Creek if need be. But you're suggesting that they might be able to go in through Hawk. And then wouldn't they be, wouldn't some of the residents be trying to leave in that area down Hawk, and there'd be some traffic problems with emergency vehicles going in one direction and people trying to exit in the other?
So the way it's set up today, it would be bollarded and controlled by emergency personnel. They would be able to enter the area and make a decision about how they want to utilize that access point. It could just be an access point for emergency vehicles to get to an emergency more directly. They could also open it up and allow vehicles to leave the area, and that would be controlled by your emergency personnel. They'd be directing traffic and having people leave if necessary.
So your issue today is you have a significant number of folks north of the creek that are served by one access in and out. This emergency access would provide a second way to deal with that. While the proposal is to include bollards across the emergency access, the city has also prepared emergency accesses that are simply signed. The modest risk in that case is that somebody will place a vehicle on the bridge in an inappropriate time. However, it is built for full vehicle access. So that would be an alternative if that were ultimately a significant council concern, is rather than to bollard the emergency access, simply sign it. And you have examples of that throughout the community where in some cases there are not bollards, it is simply signed for emergency vehicle access use. In any case, there would essentially be one more way in and out with this project than without the project. And while the project adds 44 homes, it does actually provide a second way out for everyone north of the creek.
Including houses that are currently on Bear Creek.
Existing, and the other piece is that it actually is a clear span exit rather than essentially a culverted exit with large concrete culverts. And it's actually much higher than the Laughlin Road. So in the case of flood, it would actually be a much more robust way in and out to the neighborhood north of the creek.
Yeah, I don't think I'm in a position as to knowing what would be better, signs or bollards. I think it's up to the professionals that know more about that than I do. But I do think that this has been looked at for a long time, and it seems to me that it's a reasonable solution. I also would like to thank everybody for spending the time and the energy, particularly the Save the Hills group. Think back, at least from my understanding, 7 or 8 years ago, this project has gotten a lot better. And I think everybody should be proud of the work that they've done to make this project certainly much better than it was with 76 homes and no emergency access and so on and so forth. So I think that was that's been a great benefit to everybody concerned. I also want to, I don't see any planning commissioners here tonight, but I'd like to publicly thank them for the questions and answers, or the questions that they asked of staff and others in terms of at the planning commission meeting when this came up. It was very thorough, and it certainly helps me. As I learn and try and understand what some of the questions and concerns are, so they, and again, I would like to thank Planning Commission for taking the time and the energy to question many, many things that haven't even been brought up here tonight. And lastly, the staff have done a fabulous job in terms of working on this for a number of years, and I appreciate all the energy and effort that you guys have put into this.
Councilmember Warner?
Yeah, a couple of questions here, and mostly around our flexibility and the kinds of decisions we're making. But we were just talking about bollards or signs, and I thought the last time we talked about this was you put up the temporary plastic things that you can just drive over if you have to, but it's not something that somebody would be on a Saturday night just doing for fun. So I thought there were other options here with respect to that.
There are, at council's discretion. The standard approach is essentially the lockable metal bollards, but there are other options, either signing or essentially breakaway, and those can be made out of several materials that essentially, if they're nudged with a vehicle, they basically lay down.
Right. So then, as long as we're on that topic, I just want to make sure I understand. The fire department has looked at this?
Yes, they have.
So the professional fire department said it's okay. And the name of that bridge is EVA, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So I'm not, but I did hear some comments that said fire wouldn't use it, but that doesn't make sense to me.
So the first line of approach would always be the open public street. So that would be an emergency responder's first approach. If that were compromised, they would use the secondary access. And that's the same with every emergency vehicle access we have in the community is, to the extent feasible, they always like to keep all of the equipment on open public streets, but they can use the emergency vehicle access if they need a second way in or out, and or if there's something wrong with the primary access.
So with respect to the emergency access, I mean, I've heard two things we're talking about tonight, was floods and fires, and I don't think they're likely to happen at the same time. So but I did sort of hear that kind of get a little bit confused. But so we've thought about this separately in the two events, but we've never thought about a major flood, 1,000-year rain, and a fire, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And we do plan for the 100-year flood. That's what we take a look at.
Okay, so the why I'm looking at this, and I've been around this project for a lot of years, and this strikes me as one of the projects. I mean, this is decades of going through this. So I do want to second the comment that even Ms. Andrews made about working together. I've been out there and tried to think about this pretty carefully, and I certainly understand the community's desire not to see this project happen. But I'm not sure that we got a lot of options here. But I want to just talk about a couple of things. So I want to make sure I understood the earlier conversation about the endangered species. So what I'm hearing, I think I heard, was the evidence that they are there is not sufficient to say that the EIR or the impacts aren't mitigated. Is that, we can't find because we've seen that, or we have photographs of them being there, that's not sufficient for us to find that this is not, the EIR is not satisfied?
No, to the contrary. We actually found that even though we didn't find them, we assumed they were there anyways.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes,
so that,
okay.
So the fact that their evidence that they are there is not sufficient for us to find that this project doesn't meet the requirements. Is that what I'm
We've
hearing?
already assumed they're there, correct. So it's only confirming the assumptions we've already included in the EIR. And we've already mitigated assuming that those species
So
are there.
I'm just trying to make sure I
Yeah.
understand how much latitude we've got here. So the other thing that we haven't spoken about yet was the suggestion, well, why can't we just make this all go away by buying it? And that would be, I could see the advantages of doing that. And but I'm not sure that we at this stage can require that to happen. And I just wanted to, from the city attorney, get some kind of opinion on what kind of latitude we have here.
That's correct. What you have to evaluate the project that is set before you, not look at the possibility of what the city could do with the property, as we're currently not under contract to purchase that property. Lafferty Communities is under contract to purchase that property. So that would be a separate course of action apart from your determination as to what to do with this proposal before you this evening.
So, and this gets back, and I'll get back to that in a second, but the other, my understanding that I want to make sure I'm correct is, it was suggested, well, why don't we just change the general plan in the future? But it's my understanding that once you have a general plan and a project is submitted consistent with that set of rules, that we're now into a different world. We can't do the legislative act of changing the rules.
Correct. You're not acting as a legislative body in this particular instance. In fact, you could, stray into the realm of a takings argument if you have a property that meets the requirements of the general plan and the underlying zoning, and then you attempt to midway through change what that is.
So we can't change the rules in the midstream.
Correct. Correct.
And that gives us significant legal liability.
Correct. There would be compensation that would need to be provided should the city.
So even though the council can't require that the land be made available, that doesn't preclude the community, because the suggestion has been made that they can raise the funds. That doesn't preclude them from trying to buy it, right?
Correct. If you play out that scenario, if the Save the Hill group were able to raise the funds and offer more than what the developer is offering, with taking into account the value of any potential entitlements on the property, there's nothing other than contracts that they have in place that would prevent that from happening. But presumably that would involve large sums of money.
Okay, those are my questions at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And again, I want to thank everybody for their comments tonight. And again, staff, this has been a significant evolution over the last 30 years on this. That this is originally zoned for housing in 1976, and then rezoned in 88. I think one of the speakers said that this was already open space, but it's been zoned for housing since 1976. So it hasn't been open space since I've been in Livermore. And someone else said that the access to this site is very important to people's daily lives, and that this site is currently a preserve. But it's my understanding that this is private property, and that over the course of the last 20 years, people have been allowed access to the site, trespassing, as it were, and having the free enjoyment of the site. And we also heard that, and I've seen where you've had dirt bikes out there and bikes, and some significant damage to that site. Now, they aren't currently on private property, but if this development were to go through, there would be legal access, ongoing legal access to the site, and then funds to maintain the site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And to Councilmember Warner's point, has to your knowledge, has anybody ever made an offer on this site to purchase it for open space? I know that this was stated back in 2015 that they were going to buy the site. The neighborhood was going to buy the site. Do you know if any offer was ever made?
I am personally not aware of an offer.
Okay, and somebody said that the funds are available, but I presume that would be like the Altamont open space funds, but there's a lot of very specific requirements behind that funding.
That's correct. They're tied to sites with significant biological diversity, and also for non-motorized recreation, so trail access.
Right, and this most of the grasses up there are no longer native. Is that correct?
That's true.
Yeah. Okay, so they're non-native grasslands. All right, and so as already has been established, this does meet the general plan requirements and has for some time. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, and yeah. Let me just see if I got any additional notes. One of the things I thought was interesting was somebody had made the comment that because of this vast open space, that the fire insurance for some of the residents were canceled. But on the other hand, if a certain portion of this open space and grassland, which does present a fire hazard, is reduced, wouldn't that then reduce the fire hazard? Anybody?
So the combination of better access to the area, the irrigation that happens in the yards that immediately surround the homes in that location, and the fact that the wildland interface is a grassland interface, which is actually the least dangerous type of interface versus a tree canopy or other items. The area is a relatively low risk wildland interface. Obviously, any place the city touches open space lands, there is a risk. The existing neighborhood has some level of risk because wildlands essentially touch the edge of that neighborhood. This area will not significantly increase, and as you say, in certain circumstances could actually decrease that risk in certain limited locations. And that's why we did have our fire personnel take a look at that, both for access to it, access to the open space, the ability to provide fire hydrants with inappropriate lengths so that essentially hoses can be drug to protect both this new neighborhood and the existing neighborhood effectively in the case of a fire.
So we're not talking about putting up a tree canopy like Paradise.
No.
Looking at the landscape architecture out there, it looks like they're fairly widely spaced, and there'd be looks like just some significant breaks in there, so you wouldn't have a wild grassland fire. And presumably, if the HOA is maintaining this site, you wouldn't have it go wild in a wild state.
That is true. The trees have been limited. The landscape plan contemplates a limited number of native oaks incorporated into the project around the exterior boundaries where the project abuts the wetland. There wouldn't be any trees on those adjoining property flanks because of the concern about raptors. So the project site has a pretty limited number of trees incorporated.
Okay, so it does follow the general plan. This area is not open space. It is private property, which has been accessed over the years by the community. I think last thing, has LARPD ever expressed an interest in acquiring or maintaining the property?
No, they have not.
Okay.
I do remember, though, as a former board member at LARPD, that we had looked at a plan that if this development were to be built, and this is when they're talking about 76 units, that there was that adjoining open space parcel would be managed by LARPD. So if they've brought that up again, I do not know, but I know that we discussed it at one
So
point.
that if the development went through, that there would be an associated open space?
Yes.
Well, but there is an associated open space.
Yes, and right now there's an open space where people are ready.
It would be, but
MX
it'd be managed by an HOA instead of by LARPD.
Yeah, it sounds that way to me anyway.
Okay.
The adjoining property to the west is owned by LARPD, and
Right, I'm talking about the area to the east.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it sounds like a similar thing happened. Okay. Any further questions, comments?
If I could oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just want to be quick. You know, it's really funny, and I don't mean funny. It's just interesting to hear. I've been here a few years, not as long as many, but long enough to remember when the Miralisa development and everything between Laughlin and Vasco was open space, ranch land, farmland, from North Front north. None of that existed. And I remember having exactly the same opinions as you have of this opinion, of that opinion, when I had to bring that up when I came before the council, that, and Miralisa being the last piece in that puzzle out there. But I just really, really died over the amount of habitat that had been gobbled up by all these places. And so it's interesting just to hear that all of a sudden, unfortunately, families still have kids. Kids need a place to live. They aren't going to live with mom and dad forever. This is one that's been a real tough decision for me because I didn't like the original version, 76 houses, and anybody who knows me knows that I know the wildlife in that neighborhood specifically better than probably anyone in town, because I'm out there almost every day. And I know where the tiger salamanders live. I know their grandparents. I know, you know, pretty much. I've studied them for years in the Brushy Peak area, in the alkali sinks, all these areas out there. And I remember when, you know, I remember hiking with my wheelchair up where the new Safeway is right now, because there is burrowing owl habitat. And I say the new Safeway. How old is that Safeway down there at First Street, First and Las Positas? But before that was built, there were burrowing owls that I used to check on all the time down there, daily, before Mines Road went from First Street to East Avenue. It didn't go through. Anybody? It didn't go through. And there was a big open space down there where the Safeway is, where burrowing owls were. And I know from being out there and studying, and I know, you know, many of you on the Save the Hills group are backpackers and hikers and know me from meeting me out on a trail. I don't like when this has to happen, when something has to be moved, mitigated. But unfortunately, we have to find a place to put all the people we have here. We can't keep having people drive through town from, as Mr. Barker said, Modesto, and probably as far south as Merced. And I know some that do that every day, and come into town. And I'd rather have a place for them here to shorten the commute, have them live and work in town. And we're trying pretty conscientiously during my relatively short time on council to do that, to make that happen. And this has gotten to the point, this development, where it's gotten to a place where I can just about handle it. You know, the inclusion of 85 acres is a huge piece of property. That's almost as big as Sycamore Grove. And that's kind of a good thing to hang on out there. I'd just like to see I'd wish the plan had never come up, but it's come this far now. It's been reduced in size. The homes have been reduced. There's plenty of mitigation on the fire side and public safety side. So I'm just fascinated still that, you know, because we all saw Miralisa coming in and were sweating about it back then. So just to put in a little bit of perspective more than anything.
So we're going to make a motion? Oh, comment?
So I had a bunch of questions, but I hadn't actually said anything about what I thought. So first of all, I wanted to reiterate, to add to agree with those who have already thanked staff, those who have thanked Save the Hills. I really appreciated my meeting with you, Save the Hill, well, with everybody, but when I met with you on Save the Hills, I appreciated the energy, I appreciated your dedication, and I want to encourage you to, you've heard already tonight that there is spaces on the Commission for the Arts. There's spaces on the Planning Commission. Please put that energy to use in the commissions as well, and in working on furthering city government from within as well as working in tandem with the city. I think that the work that the city has done on this over the last 10 years has been remarkable. And my job here tonight, as is all of ours, is to make a decision on whether or not this follows the rules that we have in front of us. And my judgment is that, in fact, the applicant has worked really hard to actually go ahead and follow those rules. Therefore, because I cannot find any reason not to, there's not a lot of choice here. I wanted to say one more thing, and that is about my personal history, which is that I worked hard on the urban growth boundary back in early 2000s. I worked hard to make sure that that we were going to preserve that, and which means, of course, that we get denser internally, which is actually better environmentally. It's better for us as a community. When I started looking into this, I was actually surprised at how far out the urban growth boundary went. Along with my fellow council member, when I went and I walked the bluffs, I was surprised there were actually houses out there, because I actually somehow thought that the urban growth boundary was further in. So the fact of the matter is, it was set where it was set. We live with it where we live with it. We can make those choices in the future, but I don't believe in changing the rules in the middle of the game. So.
Okay, any other comments? Councilmember Warner?
Yeah, I'll just say that I actually, as I said, I've been part of this for a lot of years, and I think the Save the Hills group has done a really good job of very professionally, is the only word I can think of bringing this to our attention and working with the council. I was there for the 2015, and in that case, they were at that time, I believe, asking for general plan changes. So we had a lot of latitude. And you can see that back then, I think John and I, we were the only ones on this group that were there for that one. And we really wanted to make sure that this project was good enough. And I think it has become good enough. There is no way under the rules that we have to work under to get this to zero. So I just want to say is that when I look at it over its evolution, that it wouldn't be as good as it is without the Save the Hills group. So, and I think that's just exemplary the way that you all handled this. And without it, it might have been at the 76. Who knows? But I think this is as best we can do. And we don't have a lot of latitude from the council point of view.
Okay. Vice Mayor, any comments? All right. What's the pleasure of the council? Do I have a motion?
Sure, I'll move we accept staff recommendation.
Okay, moved by Vice Mayor Carling. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Coomber. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. It's a much better project. Thank you. I do appreciate that. Having been an environmentalist for decades, I appreciate that.
I've never heard an environmentalist say, let's build more houses to reduce natural area.
We're not finished.
To prevent wildfire.
Thank you very much.
We're not finished.
Okay. It's funny, people complained about you guys coming in. Okay. Okay. All right, we'll take a 5-minute break. 5-minute break.